people are noticing that he seems more tired. He doesn't have the energy he once appeared to have, and he's not doing a lot of public events. Normally, after the State of the Union, the president gets on a plane and barnstorms the country, drumming up support for his policies and legislative initiatives. Not this year.
Hello, I'm Maddie Hale and welcome to the Trump Report. There is so much to discuss today. We're discussing a Financial Times article. We're going to speak about the State of the Union address. We're going to speak about some stuff coming out of the Epstein files. So my guest today is White House correspondent from The Independent, Andrew Feinberg. Thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's kick off with the State of the Union address, Andrew, on Tuesday night. How do you think Americans have perceived it? It was obviously 2 hours long, the longest in US history, but can you walk me through kind of the aftermath of it?
Well, it's pretty interesting. Not so long ago, the State of the Union was a huge event on the American political calendar every year. It didn't matter who the president was. It didn't matter what was going on in the country. Everyone tuned in to see the State of the Union speech, and it would drive the conversation for weeks and weeks afterwards. Not now. It's really been pushed off the front page after less than a day because of those new Epstein revelations that you teased and President Trump's apparent push to get into a war with Iran for reasons that haven't been made entirely clear.
And we'll get into those Epstein files in a bit, but I want to get your thoughts. Obviously, as I mentioned, you're a White House correspondent, so you're really in the thick of this. So I want to get your thoughts on this article, this Financial Times article from Edward Luce. He wrote about how Donald Trump's state of mind is a global risk. So he argues that Trump's impulsiveness, his grievance politics, his sensitivity to perceived slights are shaping US foreign policy in unpredictable ways. So examples that he uses are uncertainty on Ukraine's future, threats and grievance with NATO, the tariffs, impulsivity, the people that he hires in his cabinet, even the way that world leaders have to factor in his personality before they meet with him. So what do you make of this, Andrew? Is his state of mind a global risk?
Well, I'm not a columnist, so I'm not going to offer an opinion here. But what I will tell you is that people I talk to on both sides of the aisle in the U.S. and some not in the U.S. are increasingly more concerned than they have been about the president's mental condition. He's always been a bit of a wild card. Everything is always about him, and he changes his mind on a dime on any and all issues. But more and more, there are people that I speak to who think he's been acting increasingly erratic in ways that could be very detrimental both to the U.S. and the world as a whole. And if you look at polling recently, more and more Americans are concerned about his mental fitness, even this early in his term. If you remember with former President Biden, there were questions, there were concerns. Americans weren't sold on his fitness to serve another 4 years. And then after that June 2024 debate, everything blew up. He ended up exiting the race. Well, Donald Trump is term limited. There are 3 years left in his term, and he is the oldest person to ever be sworn in for a second term, and he'll be 80 in just a couple of weeks. And people are noticing that he seems more tired. He doesn't have the energy he once appeared to have, and he's not doing a lot of public events. Normally, after the State of the Union, the president gets on a plane and barnstorms the country, drumming up support for his policies and legislative initiatives. Not this year. J.D. Vance is going to Wisconsin today, and the president will be on the road tomorrow, but that trip is just a quick stopover on his way to Florida for the weekend.
Andrew, when you say that you're speaking to people on both sides of the political aisle that are expressing concern, are you speaking to representatives?
Well, I don't cover Capitol Hill full time. My colleague Eric Garcia does that, and my other colleague John Bowden does that. But I do talk to people who are close to people on the Hill who are not elected. Some work on the Hill, again, not necessarily elected officials, but people who do have windows into the thinking of elected officials on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House. And there are concerns. If you look at a video of the president during his 2016 campaign, those debates against Jeb Bush and 13 other Republican candidates, he sounds a lot different than the way he sounds now. Granted, it was 10 years ago, but that 10 years makes a big difference. As we learned with Joe Biden, when he ran in 2020, his campaign put on this show that he was going to be the same sort of Uncle Joe character that The Onion famously lampooned during the Obama years. And that's not what we got. And we're seeing the same thing happen with Donald Trump, and people are noticing.
Well, I wonder if it's a focal concern for a lot of Americans just with how much they really went through when it came to President Joe Biden. Of course, if you were the media and in your position, Andrew, we were covering Joe Biden's kind of dwindling mental cognitive decline from the first year or so in. But then, as you say, once this debate happened in, I think it was June 2024, the rest of the world saw it, and it's a sensitive subject now because, of course, Americans don't want to be voting in, or they don't want a president that is of a certain age group. I know that Nikki Haley was campaigning on the fact that anyone over the age of 75 who's working in government should be taking a cognitive test regardless of how they're acting or performing on the world stage. But do you think Americans are sensitive to this and just do not want this to be a headline in any way?
Well, polling is showing more and more Americans concerned about the president's cognitive fitness and overall fitness to serve the rest of his term. But I want to note something that when Donald Trump was running for this second non-consecutive term in 2023 and 2024, he had a bit of an advantage. The president frequently went out on the campaign trail. He did these long rallies. He's loud. He's kind of a figure with a lot of physicality. He's sort of robust looking, I would say. And compare that with the former president who, although he works out frequently, is quite trim, in fairly good shape for a man of his age, was not projecting the same sort of strength and robustness. A lot of that was the shuffle that appeared in his gait early on in his term. But a lot of it was perception because he was not getting out there. He was not taking questions from reporters. He was not in the mix, so to speak. Donald Trump very much likes to be in the mix, but he is retreating a bit, and it is noticeable, and it may well be that Americans are noticing it more and more.
Let's move on to kind of the world politics, Andrew. Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, they held a phone call last night. Zelensky said that the two discuss issues that our representatives will address tomorrow, as in today, in Geneva during this bilateral meeting, as well as preparations for the next meeting of the full negotiating terms in a trilateral format. At the beginning of March, we expect this meeting to create an opportunity to move talks to the leaders' level. President Trump supports this sequence of steps. So quite a diplomatic breakdown of their phone call and, of course, ahead of this Geneva meeting. But, Andrew, do you think that Zelensky questioned Trump at all on why the US abstained from voting alongside them on lasting peace at this UN General Assembly that took place on Tuesday, which is, of course, the 4-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I have no idea what President Zelensky said to President Trump during that call, but I can tell you that the abstention at the United Nations, at least according to some of the folks I've talked to, was a slight improvement over last year where we voted against it, against the same resolution with Russia and China and some others. But the president's position on Ukraine has been remarkably consistent. He essentially wants the war to end so he can take credit for it. It's a little simplistic, not really geopolitically sophisticated or showing a deeper understanding of the issues which led to the war in the first place. He's fond of saying this war wouldn't have started if I were president, not really getting why the war started and sort of the deeper geopolitical history behind it. But he wants it over. He wants to be able to stand up and say that he ended it and no other president could do this. And it hasn't been going well, but there could be some breakthroughs in these talks in Geneva. We need to wait and see.
FBI Director Kash Patel, he's reportedly fired at least 10 employees who worked on the investigation into those classified documents at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. So Mar-a-Lago was raided by agents in August 2022. It was the first time the FBI had issued a search warrant from a former president, but this case was eventually dismissed in 2024. But regardless of that, is it normal for agents associated with this investigation to be fired nearly 4 years later?
No, it's not normal at all. FBI agents are civil servants. They're not political appointees. They do what they're told, and a judge signed that warrant, and a warrant is a command from a judge. You shall search these premises, and it wasn't something that they could simply say no to or object to once a judge put his or her signature on that piece of paper. Now, I will note that this latest round of firings comes within days of more controversy swirling around Patel about his use of the government-owned airplane that he is actually legally required to use as FBI director for all travel. That's not a new thing that the FBI director has to travel on a government-owned plane. But what's new is he's been using it for all sorts of personal errands. He was in Milan for the Olympics and was famously videoed partying with the U.S. men's ice hockey team after their amazing gold medal performance. He was drinking beer and pounding the table and trying on one of the gold medals. Not the sort of thing you could imagine Robert Mueller or Jim Comey or even J. Edgar Hoover doing, for that matter. But there have been questions about whether his use of this jet has impeded other FBI operations. And every time Patel gets into a bit of hot water with the press, he finds some people to fire, I guess, because he believes that keeps him in Donald Trump's good graces. But eventually he's going to run out of people with any connection to these investigations to fire, and then he's going to have a problem.
Let's get into the Epstein files now, Andrew. We knew from last week that journalist Roger Sollenberg, he'd reported that the DOJ knew that the FBI had interviewed a woman who had accused Donald Trump of sexual assault when she was a minor, and that she was considered a credible accuser. NPR then conducted a review into these DOJ Epstein files. The evidence log provided to attorneys for Ghislaine Maxwell includes 325 FBI witness records, but 90 of those do not appear on the DOJ's website, so those files that were made public in late January. But among those 90 files, I should say, 3 of them are missing. These are FBI. 3 of those missing ones are related to this woman who accused Donald Trump of repeatedly abusing her from the age of 13. This has now been corroborated by CNN, the New York Times, NBC. While, of course, this doesn't incriminate the president, but someone wrote on X that this should be the biggest story in the world right now. So why would the DOJ not publish these 90 files, 3 of which detail serious allegations against the president?
Well, these files under the Epstein Files Transparency Act should have been released already. That law makes no provision to withhold anything for the purposes of preventing any embarrassment or political scandal, even to uncharged parties. And these forms in particular, they're called Form 302s. What happens, the FBI infamously does not necessarily record their interviews. What they do is when they talk to someone, they'll send two agents, one to ask questions, the other to take notes so they can serve as witnesses for each other if they have to testify in court. And they take those notes and they type up what's called a Form 302, which is a summary of the interview. And these were supposed to have been turned over, but these forms, along with other pretty important documents in this case, memoranda detailing why or why not to charge Epstein or other co-conspirators, and why to let him have that sweetheart deal that he had during the tail end of the George W. Bush administration, have not been released. And Democrats and some Republicans continue to clamor for them. But these three documents, the contents is potentially so inflammatory that now that it's out there that they exist and they haven't been released, that it just adds fuel to the fire, even if the president has not been accused of wrongdoing and is unlikely to be charged with anything. Even if the allegations contained in the documents are true, the statute of limitations would have expired many years ago. And again, he has not been accused of anything at this point. But the administration keeps stepping in it by not just getting these out, getting it over with, let people have their fun and move on. This could have been over months ago, but the president himself has become obsessed with this and wants it to go away. And because he wants it to go away and not be embarrassed by it, people in the administration are taking these steps, which they believe are going to prevent anything damaging from coming out about the president. But it just makes everything worse. And the story continues on, and it will continue on until all of these documents are out.
We talk about the statute of limitations, but Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman, he responded to this update about the files missing, and he said that Pam Bondi must appoint a special counsel to investigate Trump. The victims deserve justice, and the American people deserve to know whether their president is guilty of these heinous accusations. But will there be further investigations? Could a special counsel be appointed, even if the statute of limitations is in place? This could happen after the midterms if the Democrats do win back the House.
No, the Justice Department will not be appointing a special counsel. That happened during the president's prior term. Everyone remembers Robert Mueller, and he hated it. There was a special counsel investigating him during the Biden administration. That would be Jack Smith, of those two failed criminal cases against the now president. Pam Bondi is not going there. When Jeff Sessions, Trump's first attorney general, appointed a special counsel, or allowed a special counsel to be appointed because he recused himself from that Russia investigation, it ultimately led to him losing his job. And Pam Bondi quite likes her job.
Bill and Hillary Clinton, Andrew, they'll both testify this week before the House Oversight Committee over their ties and what they know about Jeffrey Epstein. So Hillary is set to testify today. Bill's set to testify tomorrow. We are expected to see videos emerge from this hearing in the coming days, as it is closed doors for right now. But they've, of course, both maintained that they've got nothing to hide. In an interview last week, Hillary Clinton said that she'd only met Ghislaine Maxwell a handful of times. They both say that, look, they've got no knowledge of what's going on. But how do you think these hearings will go? Because, I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell was a guest at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, so they can't have been just acquaintances.
I think that these depositions will be a lot of sound and fury that in the end signifies nothing. As you said, Ghislaine Maxwell might have been a guest at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, but it was a pretty big wedding. There were a lot of people there, and the relationship between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein has been pretty well documented. Hillary Clinton says she never met him. I have no reason to think that that's not accurate. But the reason these two are being deposed is because the Republican-led House Oversight Committee has been for months engaged in a really bumbling and sort of Inspector Clouseau-like attempt to deflect from any potential allegations against the president. It's this essentially jumping up and down and waving their collective arms and saying, look over here, look over here. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have not been in positions of power in decades in the case of Bill Clinton, and I believe a decade in the case of Hillary Clinton. And it's getting a bit old, according to some of the Democrats and even some Republicans I talk to, and it just keeps the lingering questions about Donald Trump in focus with this House Oversight Committee obsessing over Bill and Hillary Clinton. But we'll see what happens. The depositions are today and tomorrow, and there will be video, and could get interesting.
Andrew Feinberg, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report.
Thanks for having me again.